The alien ship descended through the thick atmosphere of an uncharted planet, its sleek metallic surface glinting faintly in the dim light of a distant sun. The crew of the Zetharian had traveled across galaxies, their mission clear: gather resources and return home. But this world was different. It felt alive, almost watching them as they landed on a barren stretch of ground surrounded by towering trees with leaves that shimmered like glass. Among the crew was Jake, a human who had been taken from Earth years ago as part of an experiment. To the aliens, he was nothing more than a curiosity, a fragile being from a primitive species. They often mocked him, especially Kale, the first officer, whose sharp tongue cut deeper than any blade. Jake ignored the taunts as he stepped off the ramp onto the soft, spongy soil. His hands were bound loosely, a reminder of his status as a prisoner, but he didn't need freedom to observe. He scanned the landscape, noting the strange shapes of the plants and the eerie silence that hung over everything. Even the air smelled different here, metallic and sharp, like nothing he'd ever encountered before. Emily, the biologist, walked beside him, her movements careful as she collected samples. Unlike Kale, she treated Jake with a quiet respect, though she rarely spoke to him directly. "Stay close," Kale barked, his voice echoing unnaturally in the stillness. "We don't know what's out there." Jake rolled his eyes but obeyed, knowing better than to provoke the arrogant alien. Kale carried himself with an air of superiority, his elongated limbs and glowing blue skin marking him as one of the elite warriors of his kind. He wore his disdain for Jake like a badge of honor, making snide comments whenever possible. Today was no exception. "You see this place," Kale said, gesturing around them. "Even your pathetic species couldn't survive here. Look at these trees. They're practically screaming danger." Jake clenched his jaw, but said nothing. He'd learned long ago that arguing with Kale only made things worse. Instead, he focused on the details of the environment, storing away every observation. Something about this planet felt important. Maybe it was the way the light filtered through the crystalline leaves, casting fractured rainbows on the ground. Or maybe it was the faint hum that seemed to vibrate in his chest, a sound so low it was almost imperceptible. Whatever it was, it stirred something deep inside him. As the group ventured further into the forest, the terrain grew rougher. Vines twisted like snakes around tree trunks, and patches of glowing moss lit their path. Then, without warning, the ground gave way beneath Emily's foot, sending her stumbling forward. Jake instinctively reached out to steady her, earning a glare from Kale. "Keep your hands to yourself, human," Kale snapped, pulling Emily back upright. "I'm fine," Emily muttered, brushing dirt off her suit. She shot Jake a quick glance, her expression unreadable. Moments later, they stumbled upon the ruins. Half buried in the earth and covered in moss, the structure looked ancient, its stone walls cracked and weathered. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, glowing faintly as if responding to their presence. The crew exchanged wary looks, none of them eager to enter. But curiosity outweighed caution, and they stepped inside. The interior was dim, illuminated only by beams of light filtering through gaps in the ceiling. Dust coated every surface, and the air smelled of decay. In one corner of the chamber, they found it, a weapon unlike anything they'd ever seen. It rested on a pedestal, pulsating with a soft blue light. The design was sleek, almost organic, and it seemed to hum with energy. Kale approached it first, sneering. "Even this dump has better tech than your people, Jake." Pathetic. Jake stared at the gun, his heart pounding. There was something about it, something that called to him. For the first time since being captured, he felt a flicker of hope. Back aboard the Zetharian the mood was tense. The crew had returned with their findings, the mysterious gun secured in a containment unit in the storage bay. Kale couldn't stop talking about it, his voice dripping with mockery every time he mentioned Jake. "Did you see his face when we found that weapon?" Kale said to the others during dinner, laughing loudly. "He probably thinks it's some kind of magic stick. Humans are so simple-minded." Jake sat in the corner of the room, pretending not to listen. He chewed slowly on the bland nutrient bar they'd given him, his eyes fixed on the table. Inside, though, his mind raced. That gun wasn't just a piece of alien tech. It was something more. He could feel it in his bones. Every time he thought about it, he remembered the way it pulsed with light, almost like it was alive. And the way it seemed to hum, it felt like it was calling to him. But he kept his thoughts to himself, knowing better than to give Cale any reason to ridicule him further. Later that night, when the ship was quiet and most of the crew had retired to their quarters, Jake crept out of his small, cramped sleeping area. The corridors were dimly lit, the faint hum of the ship's engines the only sound. He moved carefully, avoiding the security cameras as best he could. He'd memorized the layout of the ship over the years, learning which routes were safest. His destination was the storage bay where the gun was being kept. When he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment, listening for any signs of movement. Hearing nothing, he slipped inside. The room was cold and sterile, the gun resting on a metal table in the center. It looked even more impressive up close, its surface smooth and flawless. Jake approached it cautiously, his heart pounding. He reached out and touched it, his fingers brushing against the cool surface. Instantly, he felt a strange sensation, a warmth spreading through his hand, followed by a surge of energy that made his head spin. "What are you doing?" a voice whispered behind him. Jake froze, his breath catching in his throat. Slowly, he turned to see Emily standing in the doorway, her wide eyes locked on the gun. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily stepped closer, glancing nervously over her shoulder to make sure no one else was coming. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "If Cale finds out—" "He won't," Jake interrupted, his voice firm despite the fear bubbling in his chest. "I need to understand this thing. It's different. I can feel it." Emily frowned but didn't argue. Instead, she joined him at the table, studying the gun with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "It doesn't look like anything from our database," she admitted. "The symbols on it don't match any known language. And the energy signature," she trailed off, shaking her head. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Jake nodded, his mind racing. "Do you think it's dangerous?" "I don't know," Emily replied honestly. "But if Cale gets his hands on it, he'll use it without thinking. He never considers the consequences." Jake clenched his jaw, knowing she was right. Cale was reckless, always eager to prove his superiority. If he figured out what the gun could do, there was no telling what kind of chaos he might unleash. Jake couldn't let that happen. He had to learn more about it before anyone else did. Over the next few nights, Jake began sneaking into the storage bay whenever he could. Using scraps of knowledge he picked up from watching the aliens work, he started experimenting with the gun. At first, it was frustrating. The weapon didn't respond to buttons or switches like normal technology. Instead, it seemed to react to his thoughts, or maybe his emotions. When he focused hard enough, he could make the blue light pulse brighter or dimmer. Once, he accidentally triggered a burst of energy that sent a nearby tool flying across the room. Each success gave him a little more confidence. He realized the gun wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool, capable of shaping reality itself. With practice, he learned to control it better, bending the energy to his will. He practiced in secret, careful not to leave any traces of his experiments. But as his skills improved, so did his determination. This gun was his chance to change everything, to prove to Cale and the others that humans weren't as weak as they thought. One evening, as Jake was leaving the storage bay after another late-night session, he nearly ran into Cale. The alien stood in the corridor, his glowing eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What are you doing out here?" Cale demanded, his tone sharp. "Just stretching my legs," Jake lied, forcing himself to stay calm. Cale studied him for a long moment, then smirked. "Try not to get lost," Human. Wouldn't want you wandering into places you don't belong. Jake nodded, his heart racing as he walked away. He knew he was playing a dangerous game. Jake's newfound confidence began to show in subtle ways. He walked a little taller, his shoulders less slouched, and his eyes carried a glimmer of defiance that hadn't been there before. The crew noticed, though they didn't say much about it. Cale, however, couldn't ignore it. Every time he saw Jake, the human's calm demeanor seemed to mock him, fueling his growing frustration. "You've got something to say, human," Cale snapped one day during a routine maintenance check. Jake had been assigned to help with repairs, a task meant to keep him busy and out of trouble. But instead of cowering like usual, Jake simply looked up from the panel he was working on and met Cale's gaze. "No," Jake replied evenly. "Just doing my job." Cale bristled at the lack of fear in Jake's voice. "You think you're clever, don't you? Sneaking around, acting like you belong here. You're still just a prisoner." Jake didn't respond. He turned back to the panel, pretending to focus on the wires. Inside, though, he felt a surge of satisfaction. He knew Cale was suspicious, but as long as he didn't have proof, Jake was safe. Still, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Cale was sharp, and if he ever discovered what Jake had been doing with the gun, things would get ugly fast. Meanwhile, Emily continued to watch Jake closely. She'd seen the change in him too, and while she didn't fully understand it, she couldn't deny that something was different. One evening, after most of the crew had gone to bed, she found Jake sitting alone in the mess hall. He was staring at a cup of water, lost in thought. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly, pulling out a chair across from him. Jake glanced up, surprised. "Sure." Emily sat down, studying him for a moment before speaking. "You've changed," she said finally. "I can see it. What's going on?" Jake hesitated, debating how much to tell her. He trusted Emily more than anyone else on the ship, but trust could only go so far. "Let's just say I've been learning new things," he said carefully. Emily frowned. "About the gun?" Jake's silence was all the confirmation she needed. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You need to be careful, Jake. Cale suspects something. If he finds out what you're doing—" "He won't," Jake interrupted, his tone firm. "Not if you don't tell him." "I'm not going to," Emily assured him quickly. "But you're playing a dangerous game. That gun, it's powerful, more powerful than either of us understands. If you make a mistake—" "I won't," Jake said, cutting her off again. His voice softened slightly. "I know what I'm doing, and I know what's at stake." Emily sighed, shaking her head. "You remind me of someone who doesn't back down, no matter the odds. It's admirable, but also reckless." Jake smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes you have to take risks to survive." The conversation ended there, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was walking a thin line. Over the next few days, tensions aboard the Zetharian continued to rise. Cale became increasingly hostile, picking fights with Jake over minor issues. The other crew members started to notice, exchanging uneasy glances whenever the two clashed. One afternoon during a supply inventory, Cale confronted Jake again. "You've been spending an awful lot of time in the storage bay," Cale said, his glowing eyes narrowing. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Nothing," Jake replied, keeping his expression neutral. "Just doing what I'm told." Cale snorted. "Don't play dumb with me. I've seen you sneaking around. Whatever you're hiding, I'll find out." Jake forced himself to stay calm, even as his heart raced. He knew Cale was fishing for information, trying to provoke him into making a mistake. But Jake had learned patience. He wouldn't give Cale the satisfaction. Later that night, Jake returned to the storage bay, determined to perfect his control over the gun. He practiced for hours, shaping the energy into intricate patterns. Each success brought him closer to mastering the weapon, but it also made him more aware of its potential dangers. If used carelessly, The gun could cause destruction on a massive scale. Yet, as Jake stared at the pulsating blue light, he felt a strange sense of purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humans were capable of greatness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As dawn approached, Jake slipped back to his quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. He knew the risks he was taking, but he also knew one thing for certain. The aliens would soon regret underestimating him. The crew of the Zetherian was restless. Whispers spread through the corridors like wildfire, fueled by Cal's growing paranoia. He'd become obsessed with uncovering Jake's secrets, convinced that the human was hiding something dangerous. His suspicions weren't unfounded. Jake had been spending more time in the storage bay than anyone else, and the subtle changes in his behavior only added to the tension. One evening, Cal decided to act. Gathering 2 other crew members, he stormed into the storage bay without warning. The room was dimly lit, the gun resting silently on the table where it had been left. Cal scanned the area, his glowing eyes narrowing as he searched for any sign of tampering. "Check everything," he barked at the others. "If he's been messing with this thing, I want to know about it." The crew members nodded and began inspecting the weapon and its surroundings. But no matter how hard they looked, they found nothing out of place. The gun appeared untouched, its surface smooth and unmarked. Frustrated, Cal slammed his fist against the table. "He's up to something," he growled. "I can feel it." Unbeknownst to Cal, Jake had anticipated this moment. Over the past few days, he'd taken extra care to cover his tracks, erasing any evidence of his experiments. He knew Cal would eventually search the storage bay, so he'd made sure the gun looked exactly as it had when they first brought it aboard. Still, the close call rattled him. It was only a matter of time before Cal caught on. The next day, tensions reached a boiling point. During a routine meeting in the ship's command center, Cal confronted Jake in front of the entire crew. "You've been avoiding me," Cal said, his voice sharp. "Why is that?" Jake kept his expression calm, though his heart was pounding. "I've been busy," he replied simply. "Same as everyone else." "Busy doing what?" Cal pressed, stepping closer. "Playing with things you don't understand." Jake met Cal's gaze, refusing to back down. "If you've got a problem with me, say it to my face." Cal sneered, clearly enjoying the attention of the gathered crew. "You think you're clever, don't you? Sneaking around, acting like you belong here. But let me remind you, you're nothing but a prisoner. A weak, pathetic human who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as us." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Jake. For a moment, he considered walking away, letting Cal's words roll off him like they always did. But something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the months of mockery, the constant reminders of his supposed inferiority. Or maybe it was the knowledge that he now held power far beyond anything Cal could imagine. Whatever it was, Jake wasn't going to take it anymore. "You want to talk about weakness," Jake said, his voice low but steady. "Fine. Let's talk about it. You strut around this ship like you're some kind of king, but the truth is, you're scared. Scared of things you don't understand. Scared of anyone who might actually be better than you." Cal's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed into slits. "You dare?" "I'm not done," Jake interrupted, taking a step forward. "You call me weak. But look at yourself. All you do is bark orders and push people around. That's not strength. That's cowardice. And deep down, you know it." The room was deathly quiet, the crew frozen in place. No one had ever spoken to Cal like that before. For a moment, it seemed like Cal might explode, his fists clenched and his body trembling with rage. But instead, he forced himself to laugh, though it sounded hollow. "Big words for someone who's still chained to this ship," he said, his tone dripping with venom. "Let's see how brave you are when I decide your fate." Jake didn't flinch. "Do what you want," he said evenly. "But remember this, I'm not afraid of you." The standoff ended when the captain ordered everyone back to work, but the damage was done. Kel stormed off, his pride wounded, while the rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Emily watched Jake carefully, her expression unreadable. Later that night, she found him alone in the mess hall, staring at a cup of water just like before. "You really enjoy pushing your luck, don't you?" she said, sitting down across from him. Jake shrugged. "Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself." Emily sighed. "Just be careful. Kel won't forget what you said. He'll find a way to make you pay." Jake nodded, knowing she was right. But as he thought about the gun hidden in the storage bay, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. If Kel wanted a fight, Jake was ready to give him one. The days that followed were tense. Kel avoided Jake, but it wasn't because he had forgiven him. Instead, the alien seemed to be plotting something, his sharp eyes always watching for an opportunity. Jake could feel it. The air on the Zetherian asterisk was thick with hostility, and every interaction felt like walking on thin ice. Still, Jake refused to back down. He carried himself with a quiet confidence now, knowing that he held a secret weapon. Literally. One evening, after another long day of menial tasks, Jake found himself alone in the storage bay again. The gun rested on the table, its blue glow faint but steady. He picked it up carefully, running his fingers over its smooth surface. It felt different now, almost alive, as if it recognized him. Jake closed his eyes and focused, letting the energy flow through him. Over time, he had learned to control it better, shaping the energy into precise forms. Tonight, though, he didn't practice. He simply held it, thinking about what came next. "Jake," a soft voice called from the doorway. Startled, Jake turned to see Emily standing there, her expression wary. "You scared me," he said, lowering the gun. "I didn't mean to," Emily replied, stepping inside. She glanced around nervously before closing the door behind her. "Can we talk?" Jake hesitated but nodded. "What is it?" Emily took a deep breath. "Cal's planning something. I overheard him talking to the captain. They think you've tampered with the ship's systems." Jake frowned. "That's ridiculous. I haven't touched anything outside this room." "I know," Emily said quickly, "but they're looking for excuses to punish you. Cal's furious about what happened in the command center. He won't let it go." Jake sighed, setting the gun back on the table. "I figured as much, but I'm not going to sit here and let him bully me either." Emily stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't have to face him alone. Let me help you." Jake looked at her, surprised. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." "Because I believe in fairness," Emily said firmly, "and because I've seen how hard you've worked to understand that gun. You're not the person they think you are. You're smart, resourceful, and brave. If anyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, it's you." For a moment, Jake didn't know what to say. No one had ever stood up for him like this, not since he'd been taken from Earth. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you. I could use all the help I can get." Over the next few days, Emily smuggled small tools and parts to Jake, helping him refine his experiments with the gun. Together, they discovered new ways to harness its power. Jake learned to disable machinery temporarily, create barriers of solid energy, and even manipulate gravity in limited areas. Each breakthrough brought him closer to mastering the weapon, but it also made him more aware of its dangers. The gun wasn't just a tool, it was a responsibility. Meanwhile, Kel grew increasingly impatient. Unable to find concrete evidence against Jake, he resorted to petty cruelty. During mealtimes, he deliberately spilled drinks near Jake or knocked over trays, laughing when others joined in. Jake ignored it, focusing instead on his training. But the constant harassment wore on him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before Kel crossed a line. That moment came sooner than expected. One afternoon, while Jake was working in the engine room, Kel cornered him. "You think you're so clever, hiding whatever you're doing," Kel sneered, blocking the exit. "But I'm done waiting. It's time you paid for your insolence." Before Jake could respond, Kale lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar. Jake struggled, but Kale was stronger, pinning him against the wall. "No one defies me and gets away with it," Kale spat. Just then, Emily appeared in the doorway. "Stop," she shouted, her voice shaking but firm. "Leave him alone." Kale turned, glaring at her. "Stay out of this, Emily. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Emily shot back, stepping forward despite the fear in her eyes. "If you hurt him, I'll report you to the captain. And trust me, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." For a moment, Cal hesitated, his grip on Jake loosening. Then, with a growl of frustration, he shoved Jake aside and stormed off. Emily rushed to Jake's side, helping him to his feet. "You didn't have to do that," Jake said quietly. "Yes, I did," Emily replied, her voice steady. "We're in this together now." As they walked back to the storage bay, Jake realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. With Emily's help and the power of the gun, he was ready to take on whatever Kale threw his way. The next morning, the atmosphere aboard the Zetharian Asterisk was electric. News of Emily's confrontation with Kale had spread quickly, and whispers filled the corridors. Some crew members admired her bravery, while others feared Kale's inevitable retaliation. Jake, however, felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since being taken from Earth, he wasn't facing his challenges alone. Emily's loyalty gave him strength, and the gun gave him power. That afternoon, Jake decided it was time to test the weapon in a more practical setting. With Emily keeping watch, he slipped into the cargo hold, where piles of crates and equipment provided the perfect training ground. He held the gun firmly, focusing on its hum beneath his fingers. "Let's see what this thing can really do," he muttered under his breath. Firing the gun wasn't like pulling a trigger. It required focus, almost like visualizing what he wanted to happen. Jake aimed at a stack of metal crates and imagined them floating. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a faint whirring sound, the crates lifted off the ground, hovering in midair as if suspended by invisible strings. Jake grinned, adjusting his grip to move them around. It was easier than he expected, as though the gun responded to his confidence. "Careful," Emily warned, glancing nervously toward the door. "If anyone sees you—" "I know," Jake interrupted, lowering the crates gently back to the floor. "But we need to be ready. Kale won't stop until he gets what he wants." Emily nodded reluctantly. "Just don't underestimate him. He's dangerous." Jake didn't argue. He knew Kale was unpredictable, but he also knew one thing for certain: the alien underestimated humans. And that would be his biggest mistake. Later that evening, tensions reached a breaking point during dinner. The crew gathered in the mess hall, their conversations hushed and uneasy. Kale sat at the center of the room, glaring at Jake across the table. His glowing eyes burned with barely contained rage. "You think you're untouchable now," he sneered, his voice cutting through the silence. "I've seen your little tricks, human. They mean nothing." Jake met his gaze without flinching. "Then why are you so scared?" The room fell silent. Kale stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Scared? Of you?" He laughed bitterly, though his clenched fists betrayed his anger. "You're nothing but a pathetic prisoner playing with toys you don't understand." Jake leaned forward, his tone steady. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly what you should be afraid of." Cal's expression darkened. Without warning, he lunged at Jake, grabbing him by the collar and dragging him out of his seat. The other crew members scrambled to intervene, but before anyone could act, Jake raised the gun he'd been hiding under the table. A burst of blue energy shot out, striking the wall behind Kale and leaving a scorched mark. Everyone froze, staring in shock. "You want to keep pushing me," Jake said, his voice cold. "Go ahead. See what happens." Kale released him, stepping back cautiously. For the first time, Genuine fear flickered in his eyes. What? What is that thing? It doesn't matter what it is, Jake replied, standing tall. What matters is what I can do with it. And trust me, you don't want to find out. The standoff ended when the captain arrived, demanding an explanation. Cale tried to accuse Jake of sabotage, but the evidence was clear. The gun hadn't caused any real damage, and Jake had only used it in self-defense. Reluctantly, the captain ordered everyone to return to their duties, though the tension remained palpable. As the crew dispersed, Emily approached Jake, her eyes wide. That was risky, she said quietly. I know, Jake admitted, but it worked. Cale knows now. He can't touch me. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Just promise me one thing. What's that? Don't let this go to your head, she said seriously. Power like that, it changes people. Don't become someone you're not. Jake looked at her, considering her words. Finally, he nodded. I won't. This isn't about revenge. It's about proving we're worth something. All of us. As they walked away together, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. The gun had shifted the balance of power, but it had also given him a responsibility. Now, it was up to him to use it wisely, and to show the aliens that humans were far stronger than they ever imagined. The days that followed were a mix of tension and quiet respect. Cale kept his distance from Jake, though his eyes still burned with anger whenever their paths crossed. The other crew members began to treat Jake differently too, not with kindness exactly, but with a cautious acknowledgement of his newfound power. Even the captain seemed hesitant to assign Jake menial tasks, as if afraid of provoking another confrontation. Jake didn't let the change in attitude go to his head. He continued practicing with the gun in secret, honing his skills while Emily kept watch. Together, they explored its capabilities, discovering new ways to use the energy it produced. Jake learned to repair broken machinery by reshaping metal parts, create barriers to protect himself, and even disable systems temporarily without causing permanent damage. Each success gave him more confidence, but he also grew increasingly aware of the weapon's potential dangers. One wrong move could cause chaos aboard the ship, or worse. One evening, during a routine maintenance check, the Zetharian**'s gravity systems malfunctioned. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship as objects floated freely through the air. Panic spread quickly, especially among the newer members who weren't used to such emergencies. In the chaos, no one noticed Jake slip into the engineering bay. With the gun in hand, he focused on the damaged control panel, visualizing the circuits reconnecting. A soft hum filled the room as the system rebooted, restoring gravity within minutes. When Jake returned to the main corridor, he found the crew gathered around the captain, who was trying to figure out what had caused the sudden fix. It wasn't me, one engineer insisted. I barely touched the controls. The captain frowned, scanning the group. Then, it was me, Jake said calmly, stepping forward. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, some filled with disbelief, others with awe. Cale glared at Jake, his jaw tight. You expect us to believe you fixed the gravity systems. With what? Jake held up the gun, its blue glow faint but unmistakable. With this. Cale scoffed. That's impossible. You're lying. Am I? Jake replied, his voice steady. Why don't you check the logs? Or better yet, ask your engineers how something like that could happen. The captain hesitated, then nodded at the engineers. After a quick inspection, they confirmed Jake's story. The repairs matched his description perfectly. The captain studied Jake for a long moment before speaking. How did you do it? I've been studying the gun, Jake admitted. It can manipulate energy in ways we don't fully understand. I figured out how to use it to fix things instead of breaking them. The captain exchanged uneasy glances with the crew. Finally, he sighed. This changes things. If you can repair systems with that weapon, you'll need to assist the engineering team moving forward. Jake nodded, sensing an opportunity. Fine. But there's a condition. The captain raised an eyebrow. What's that? I want access to the ship's database, Jake said firmly. If I'm going to help, I need to learn more about your technology and about where we're going next. Cale stepped forward, his voice sharp. You can't trust him. He's just a human. And yet he saved the ship, Emily interjected, stepping beside Jake. Her tone was calm but firm. If it weren't for him, we'd still be floating around in zero gravity. Maybe it's time we started trusting him, at least a little. The captain considered her words, then nodded reluctantly. Very well. You'll have limited access, but any suspicious activity, and you'll answer to me. Jake agreed, knowing this was a small victory, but an important one. For the first time, the aliens were treating him as something more than a prisoner. As he walked away with Emily, she smiled faintly. You handled that well. I had to, Jake replied. This is our chance to prove ourselves, to show them we're not just weak humans. We're capable of contributing, maybe even leading. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Just remember what I said earlier. Power like that, it comes with responsibility. Jake glanced down at the gun, its surface cool beneath his fingers. I know, and I won't forget. Over the next few days, Jake worked closely with the engineering team, using the gun to repair damaged systems and improve efficiency. His knowledge of alien technology grew rapidly, thanks to his access to the database. The crew began to see him in a new light, not as a prisoner or a curiosity, but as someone who could make a difference. Even Cal's hostility softened slightly, though he still avoided Jake whenever possible. But Jake knew the peace wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, Cal would try to reclaim his dominance, and when that happened, Jake would be ready. As the days passed, Jake's role aboard the Zetharian continued to evolve. The crew began relying on him more and more, especially during emergencies. His ability to repair systems with the gun made him indispensable, and even those who had once mocked him now sought his help. Cale, however, remained bitter. He watched Jake from a distance, his glowing eyes filled with resentment. It was clear he hadn't forgiven Jake for humiliating him, or for proving that humans were capable of more than anyone expected. Jake tried to ignore Cal's simmering anger, focusing instead on his work. With Emily's support, he delved deeper into the ship's database, learning everything he could about the aliens' technology and their mission. He discovered maps of uncharted planets, logs of past expeditions, and schematics for advanced weapons, far beyond anything Earth had ever created. Each new piece of information fueled his determination to master the gun and use it wisely. One evening, as Jake sat in the engineering bay reviewing data, Emily joined him. You've changed, she said softly, watching him scroll through the screen. I mean, you're still the same person, but stronger, more confident. Jake smiled faintly. It's hard not to feel different when everyone suddenly needs you. Emily nodded. Do you think they'll ever truly accept you, or are you just a tool to them? I don't know, Jake admitted. Maybe both. But I'm not doing this for their approval. I'm doing it because I have to prove that humans aren't weak, that we can stand alongside them, and maybe even lead. Emily hesitated before speaking again. Just be careful. Not everyone will see it that way. Some might see you as a threat. Jake glanced at her, understanding the warning behind her words. Like Cal. She didn't answer directly, but her silence said enough. The confrontation came sooner than Jake expected. During a routine navigation check, Cal cornered him in the corridor. You think you're so clever, Cal spat, his voice low and dangerous. Fixing things, earning their trust. But none of that matters. You're still nothing but a prisoner. Jake turned to face him, keeping his expression calm. If I'm nothing, then why are you so angry? Cal stepped closer, his glowing skin casting an eerie light on the walls. Because you're a liar, a fraud. You don't belong here. And yet here I am, Jake replied evenly. helping keep this ship running while you waste your time hating me. Cal's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, it seemed like he might strike Jake, but then he stopped himself, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Fine, play the hero all you want, but sooner or later you'll slip up. And when you do, he let the threat hang in the air before turning and walking away. Jake exhaled slowly, his heart racing. He knew Cal was right about one thing. Mistakes happened. But he wasn't about to let fear control him. Instead, he redoubled his efforts, practicing with the gun every chance he got. He learned to stabilize failing systems without causing disruptions, create energy shields to protect against external threats, and even enhance the ship's engines for short bursts of speed. Each skill added another layer to his growing reputation as someone the crew couldn't afford to lose. Despite the tension with Cal, Jake found moments of peace. Emily often joined him in the storage bay, bringing updates from the crew or simply sitting quietly as he practiced. Their friendship deepened, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "You've earned this," she told him one night as they reviewed the latest repairs. "Don't let anyone take it away from you." "I won't," Jake promised, though he knew the fight wasn't over. Cal wouldn't give up easily, and Jake would need to stay vigilant. A few days later, the captain called a meeting in the command center. The crew gathered around the holographic display, where a map of their route flickered above the table. "We're approaching a heavily damaged sector," the captain announced. "Repairs are critical if we're to reach our destination safely." All eyes turned to Jake. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, the gun resting securely in his hand. "Tell me what needs to be done," he said, his voice steady. The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You're in charge of the repairs. Don't disappoint us." As the crew dispersed to prepare, Cal lingered, glaring at Jake. "Enjoy your moment," he muttered. "It won't last." Jake met his gaze without flinching. "We'll see." With Emily by his side, Jake led the team into the damaged section of the ship. The work was challenging, but the gun made it possible. By the time they finished, the Zetharian asterisk was stronger than ever, and so was Jake. The crew's respect for him grew, and even Cal's hostility began to waver. Though the road ahead would be difficult, Jake knew one thing for certain. The aliens would never underestimate him